All right, I think we are live. Yes, we are. Hello, everybody. It's fantastic to be back. I love these chats, they're so cool. And we're trying something like slightly different this time. We're going to be telling a couple of stories. So, this month it's Women's Month, and a lot of women in tech events and things are like a little bit fluffy and a little bit feely. And I mean, that stuff matters. Like the fluffy stuff is very, very important. But I wanted to put together something a little bit different and just show you some like seriously hardcore people who've done some really cool things. So they're going to tell some stories. Now, this isn't going to be a sage on the stage thing. We are quite keen to keep things as interactive as possible as usual. So like the aim is to resemble a group of geeks geeking out together about like cool stuff that they've faced. So yeah, as our speakers speak, feel free to ask questions and we'll bring them up on the screen. And yeah, that is what we're doing today. So I am going to introduce our people. So first of all, there is Maia, and she works for Luno, where she's basically in charge of all the like Android competency stuff, which is quite a hell of a job. She's a veteran when it comes to mobile engineering, and she has a focus and love of Kotlin and Android. She started being a geek quite a long time ago on a her first computer was a ZX81, and there was no internet. She is quite passionate about learning and exploring new things and working with people. And she's a dog person, and I'm a dog person, so it's points. And she enjoys yoga and dancing. Yeah, I think. Yeah, and then I'll introduce everybody. I'll just go for that. So our next guest of honor is Thandile. And Thandile is a data engineer at Dae.mn. She's a senior person there. She has a master's in philosophy in data science, specializing in fintech, which is a hell of a mouthful. Like, that's wild. And she's worked in a lot of different places. Like she's worked as a software engineer, as a data scientist, as a data engineer, and she's very passionate about developing young female techies and using tech to empower people that need to be empowered, which is great. Yeah, so that's fantastic. So those two are going to be telling us some stories. And then our other guests here are Dimple. Dimple is a alumnus from Umuzi, currently working at BBD, and I think that she's going to have some pretty good perspectives and some pretty good questions to ask. And then Whitney is a more senior developer and manager of people and that kind of thing. And yeah, so I think they'll both have a lot of good, good perspectives. Is there anything important that I left out? Feel free to. Okay, cool. So I think, Maia, are you happy to tell us your story?
I am, if I can find the unmute button.
Oh, you found it.
Yeah, okay, good. That was the right reaction.
Started with
cool.
a bang.
Yeah, so my story is a story from my very, very first job as a professional software developer. I had engineering background, but I never did any software training. They didn't teach us software when I was working. And the product I was working on, I'll explain it to you. We had like a telephone exchange, and there were like telephone lines coming in and phones you could have. But this is like now 1990, 1991. So it's like a really long time ago. And there's one board in this telephone exchange that has the CPU on it. And that board has software inside it that has a state machine. So if you can imagine those old phones, if you lift up the phone and you dial 0, like in a hotel, then it goes to, say, the front desk or whatever. So there was a state machine in there that if you dial these numbers would take you to certain places or connect you to certain things or connect you to a line out. And so I was working on a team, on the software on the inside of that CPU of that telephone exchange. There were no IDEs. You couldn't put breakpoints. They had like a plug that you plug in where the chip was. And if you wanted to debug, then you needed to book an hour on the machine. And then you had like 2 telephones to play with and you could try your stuff out. So you were debugging in your head most of the time. No laptops, no computers. It was a literal RS-232 cable plugged into the HPUX machine, right? So imagine this, orange screen, RS-232, one screen, no windows, multiple file editing using VI.
Oh, God.
No debugging. So you had to debug everything in your head. So my company decided, we've got all of this. This is working fantastically. Great. Now we're going to sell this thing to a call center. Now we were used to having the state machine could do like transfer the calls all around. We're going to sell this machine to a call center, a busy call center. And what's going to happen is all these calls come streaming in and then they get placed in a queue. And as the people come off the call, the new call gets automatically routed onto the person's phone. So have these angry customers or people with questions, whatever, coming in, waiting in the queue, listening to music on hold, some other music on hold, and then they get fed into these agent calls. I wrote the software, I changed the state machine, you just flip things around, and then the whole state machine changed, and it went into this mode because the agents that were answering, they didn't want to press like a button to pick up or lift up. They were constantly with headsets on this phone line. So then, now everything works perfectly. We tested it. We shipped it. You can't send the code to, it was a UK customer. You can't send the code.
Like
you literally have to put a chip in an envelope to send it there or ship a box, right? Okay, chip's there, everything. It's installed. It's fine, except we keep getting these calls. They say that the calls are dropping, right? The calls are dropping. And we're getting more and more and more and more furious people because the calls are dropping. But every single time I test it, every single time I check it, right? It works perfectly. These state machines are perfect. It looks fantastic. I don't ever have the problem, me and my 2 telephones. I never have the problem, right?
Oh, gosh.
At one point, I got this letter. Now, you know how people in the UK, they are very polite. So they were saying very politely in the letter, this and that. I can't even know what they said. But the final sentences were that if you don't fix this by X date, you can come pick up your telephone exchange in the parking lot. So post shows. Within 2 days, I have to figure out clothes to wear now because this is now me, engineer, going into this world of business. I can't go in my jeans and in my sneakers. I borrow clothes. It's like overnight, fly me to London. I've got to go there and I've got to sort this out. And I walk into this office and it's like crazy angry people. They're so crazy angry at me that I can't even think straight. I can't even imagine how this thing must work, right? My kitten heels are killing me. It's pandemonium. And that night I'm lying. Now, of course, I can't read the code, right? So what I had was in my bag, I had those dot matrix printouts of the actual state machine with highlighter pens. Okay? Highlighter pens. So you imagine me, so that night it's like I'm sitting at the desk in the hotel and I'm going through this thing with highlighter pens and I can't understand it. It all works perfectly. How is this even, it goes through perfectly. So that night I'm crazy with stress. My stomach is like this. And just as I'm falling asleep, this code kind of like plays in my head. And now I can explain to you exactly what happened. But then I found the next day I found one of the senior engineers and I said to him, can it be this? Can it be this? So what it was is that CPU has a main loop, right? And so the calls come in and it's got a main loop. But it's got an interrupt handler. Now me, with no computer science background, I know nothing about threads. I know nothing about concurrency. I know nothing about these things and how they can affect a data structure. And so what was happening was there was one data structure that had all of these calls in it that get fed to the other agents. But when a new call comes in with an interrupt, it's like a second thread and it would put that call into this data structure and the data structure wasn't concurrently safe. And so it would just like, I don't know, nuke someone out of that thing. And then someone would just be listening to music and hold forever. Like, you know how crazy angry that can make you.
Yeah.
So then the simple thing we did was figure out how to use a different data structure that would just like do things differently so that if you had that situation, it wouldn't just nuke some entry out of the data structure. Of course, it wasn't that simple because you had to code the chip, put the chip in an envelope. 3 days later, envelope arrived, then install. I actually think we probably lost that customer. But
Learn some
I
lessons.
learned, I mean, that lesson.
I mean, if that is the one, that story is so shocking.
Like the most hated for a while.
Imagine me like 1992, and they're thinking, who is this woman that they're sending here to fix our things, right? It's like, what does she even know? Like, how could she even make it any better?
It's even funnier. Like the story is like colored with these details. Like a proper engineer is like in borrowing fancy office clothes.
And like a little blazer, because I mean, anyway. So
that's
needless
amazing.
to say, I learned a very good lesson, which is so vivid that I can, like, to this day, I can tell you exactly that's what it is. And anytime it's like that, the first thing, oh, is there an atomic integer we can rather use if there's anything like a thread that's gonna be on the scene?
Sure. That's wild. That's so wild.
I applaud that story. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
That was certainly hardcore.
Yeah.
I'm also so glad I'm not the only person that has code nightmares.
I've had code nightmares. Yeah, like code dreams are wild. So I used to practice BJJ quite seriously, which is not as dirty as it sounds. It stands for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is like a submission grappling thing. And I remember I was training really hard and I was working on this impossible thing. And like, I just had like BJJ and code in my head. And one of my dreams, I was like coding really hard to get someone in an armbar. And they're like, and I was like, and it was just like, what is going on in my brain? So yes, code dreams can be fantastic sometimes, and sometimes you solve real problems, which is great.
I mean, maybe you broke through to the Matrix, Sheena. I mean, it's like you really just
so.
The veil of reality was thinner.
Yeah, my matrix was like Lumo colored, right? Because of, like, if you can imagine the 90s with all those Lumo highlighters everywhere.
That's wild.
Of course, the 90s would have Lumo code matrix, of course.
Yeah. Poofy hair. Yeah, gosh.
It kind of feels like you were debugging with a highlighter. I won't lie.
Yeah.
Oh, it was. I mean, I had the yellow highlighter for the incoming call and the pink highlighter for the person that was answering on the other side. And then luckily I'd made enough printouts of all the state machines. You know, because if I'd forgotten one file, then I would have been blind.
Yeah, that's completely nuts. So then why were you at the client? Were you there to like be glared at so that they could see that you're working on it? And then because you said that you needed to like get another chip sent into you.
Because we didn't understand the problem.
Okay, so it was just to like be like, okay, let me experience this
There was live data, I think.
Okay,
yeah, because
that makes sense.
And also the customer wanted us to see us doing something. So it was a combination of that.
Optics.
It was a combination of like that we didn't, I mean, I could not reproduce that fault. Yeah. Not with only 2 telephones and only a half-hour slot on the in-circuit emulator. There was no way that I could. I can only imagine that fault, and I could only imagine that fault. You can only imagine that fault if you know anything about concurrency.
So wild. Like,
I feel it. I feel like we had like the star story. Like, how can you possibly trump that? Like now, what do we say? Like just terrible with our IDEs and like our debugging and like everything that we have available.
Yeah, but the benefit now is we've got so much more code, right? I mean, the amount of code that you work with every day, it's reams. You can't print it out anymore.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, we've got the tools to help us and to back it up. But that, in those days, I could literally lay it out on the floor, on the desk, and see it all. And I can't do that anymore.
You made me feel slightly better. Thank you.
Can I ask, what does that actually feel like, being able to actually look at the pieces of paper and be like, and imagine the code live, like this is how each step works and this is how each process goes and this is how everything works? Because I mean, we see it on the computer and then you can easily just like run your IDE and be like, okay, I'm testing it now. But you literally had to visualize it and be like, hey, this is what it does. this is what I intend for it to do, and this is how it should work. What is that like?
Yeah, it's a little bit like running the steps through my head, like literally like break pointing, like thinking, okay, the memory would be like this, the memory would be like this, then this happens, the memory would be like this, then it goes on this path, and making pencil marks with an eraser, because I'm going to run through this multiple times, like literally writing next door what it is. So actually almost mechanically stepping through everything. And then at every point where there's a decision, like an if, thinking, what assumption am I making? What could have changed? What could make that this thing is not going left when I think it should go right, or whatever? Because you can't set it up. You just literally have to question every single assumption. And how often did I find a bug, which was that the people who wrote the code before me, or me even, make a certain assumption that this thing's going to be this long, or these things are going to come in this order, and that in real life it's not like that. Or someone else changes the code and then it doesn't work like that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. When I was learning to code initially, the first language I learned was Turbo Pascal, and I learned it from some books when I was in high school. And I think it was called Truth Tables. I think that was what they named it. But yeah, it must be. So basically, it's like a table, and then you like write down like the line number that you're on, and then like the values of all the variables, and you're like, cool, what line does it go to next? This one. Okay, and the values of all the variables, and like if it's a loop, then you like loop, and you're like, cool. Now we're at n equals 5, right? Now we exit the loop.
Exactly.
And, so that's also I did that, and it's time consuming, but it's also really nice because in the beginning it takes a while, but then you get to a point where you can do it really quickly, and you can just look at it and be like, oh, it goes da, 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 da. Okay, cool, and then that's the problem. But it does take some doing, and in C it takes a lot of doing because it's kind of a tricky language in a lot of ways. I see a whole lot of comments in the from the audience about TDD, so I'm guessing no unit tests because you're in C. Yeah. None of that. It wasn't a thing.
No. So, I mean, the one thing I would say is you can do those variables quickly, but if you've got a bug that you don't understand, you've got to actually stop and question your assumptions. You don't need to question it on the loops, or I thought you don't need to question it on the loops. Turns out, in the middle of the loop, the data structure changed. So yes, you have to also in the loop check your assumptions, because
that's so hard. Like if I'm, I don't know, if there's a piece of code that's behaving in a weird way and I'm really scratching my head about it, then I'll almost be like, okay, something in between this is broken, and then I'll try and inspect something like in the middle and do almost like a binary search to try and find the bit that's broken. And that works really well, but it implies running the code, which is impossible in your case. I see a cool question here. I'm just gonna bring it up. So, were there any logging capabilities? Guess not. Scared face.
Okay, so if the actual telephone, you can dial numbers and you can hear a tone. That's it.
Okay.
No feedback.
Okay.
No LEDs, nothing. If it's running, you can't see. That's what you can see. If it's running in the in-circuit emulator, you can sometimes put a breakpoint and look at some stuff. But where do you log to? You can't, there's no logging. So, no.
That is wild. Who else here has written C code? See a show of hands. Okay, I have.
C++.
C++, that's good. Yeah, I've also done C++.
That's even worse. C++ makes me shudder.
Really? I found C like way weirder. Just because it's like C++ gives you extra abstractions, so you get like classes and things like that. C, you don't get that yet, if I recall correctly. It's been a long time. Maybe.
So, I mean, C's just got less words that you've got to learn, right? And less syntax that you've got to figure out. And you can actually just work with those like core things, the ifs and the loops and the memory access and so on. And you don't have the whole object orientation thing that you have to think about.
Yeah. Still pretty tricky. And then the other thing that comes to mind is just like anxiety management. So this is something that's really tough because I've had situations before where like code goes down and you're just like, holy shit, and everybody cares a lot and are a little bit upset with you. And I think it sounds like you were under a lot of just like angry eyes when you were doing your work, and like most people find it really hard to focus under those circumstances, and it just seems like this, like everything was stacked against you. Do you have any strategies that you used for just like calming yourself?
Now I do, but I didn't have then. So I think the saving grace then was that I couldn't debug anything at the site. I could only go back to the hotel and go with my Luma markers and see what I could do. There wasn't a way to work on it at site.
So it's just like,
I mean,
is
now,
the story, and I can do what I can do. Okay.
Yeah. And then it's just like cool. Sit in the meeting and wait for them all to finish shouting, and then just like drink a glass of water and then go back to the hotel and then do something.
Okay. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, that's very tough.
Maybe I think sometimes it's a good note for people who are managing devs that I know sometimes when things go horribly wrong, you know, the tendency to be like, like get stressed, and because but I think just if you can remain as calm as possible so that you don't push that stress onto somebody as well, because I mean, generally speaking, I think what people freak out about is like they're actually hired to learn and for their minds, and sometimes when things go wrong, that's a part of learning. That's a part of we don't have a fully autonomous robot coding army yet, and humans, make mistakes, and sometimes that loses companies money. But like also not investing in software development might lose you even more money. So just kind of keeping the bigger picture in your mind and just being like, yeah, like this is fine and there's fire.
Yeah, I think
and the thing I would add to that is that it's impossible to think logically about things if you're being emotional, or if I'm being emotional. If I'm like freaking out because the customer's freaking out, I cannot get that logic in my head, and I can't think about things logically. It's impossible. So I need to get to a place where I'm not emotionally connected to the thing I'm trying to solve before I can actually untangle it.
It's a big deal. Yeah, and I think like Whitney's point is also like, I'm sure we've all had that like project manager person who's like, have you solved it yet? How about now? Have you solved it yet? Hey, knock knock. Okay, I'm gonna call you. It's like, no. Yeah, so I think that's like, if there is a big fire happening, then I think it's partially the role of the manager type or the scrum master or whoever's doing that role to be like, okay, let's protect the devs and their headspace so that they can in fact focus and like actually solve this. Yeah. What you were saying, or something.
I just had a great manager when I worked at the CTO of Superbalist. I worked at Superbalist, and the CTO of Superbalist is like so calm. He gets even calmer under pressure. So there was one of my unfortunate stories so I actually wrote the code that has those little like low stock banners on the front end, and I'm a back-end developer, so like. And I ended up somehow turning all of those blue at one point, and they're meant to be orange, and it just looks very strange when they're all blue. And it was after like a whole bunch of things had gone wrong, and I mean, like I'm trying to remember correctly, but I think it was using like WebSockets and stuff. It was just like really like it was a mess. And I eventually I was trying to fix it too quickly. Something had gone wrong where they weren't displaying, and then I turned all of them blue because I was going too quickly. And then everyone was just like, oh, Whitney, just calm down. Like you're gonna hurt yourself and the website. So it was proposed that I had like coding mittens, and then if you're wearing the mittens, you're not allowed to code.
The phrase that I used to use a lot on a friend of mine who I taught to code was "less haste, more speed," and that seems to work as well. like I think one strategy that I like for just chilling or like calming down so I can focus if there is something big going on is like literally like stop everything, take some breaths, because if you're just like you can afford 10, 20 seconds, you know, just to like calm yourself. So take the time, and then like it's a couple of seconds, and then once you're through that, it tends to help you. So you just like stop, do a little system reset, look at your pot plant or your crocheted turtle if that's your thing, and move on with life. I see some really cool questions here. Here's another one. So I see some cool questions. I put some stars on them. I think that they're probably like nice discussion points for everybody. So I'm not going to ask them specifically to Maia, but I'll ask them at the end. So yes, now you know that. All right. I think, Thandile, are you keen to share your story?
Yes,
Well,
sure.
rock on.
Okay,
Woo.
cool. Thank you, Sheena. So I am a data consultant. As Sheena said, I work at Dae.mn. So in a data consultant role, you kind of expected to do data engineering, data architecture. So that would be what does the data look like in the database, the table structures and everything, and then a bit of data ops. So this was my first consulting role. And so what I've noticed, the biggest difference between like working in like a product company and a consulting company is that consulting is much less forgiving. And like, I don't know if it's just our company that we're working at, they keep a very close eye on all the consultants. So should anything go wrong, you're going to be very quickly notified on Slack what's going on. So yeah, but so yeah, in our team, we work within the data finance team. And so we build pipelines for finance to enable them to do their reporting for their periodic processes. And so one of these pipelines was actually built by our team last year, but I joined the team last year around about the time that they were putting this into production. And this was like a super complex pipeline, and no one on the team wanted to touch it as soon as it got into production. Everyone was like, okay, I'm not it. We all just hoped for the best. And so, what was really difficult about this pipeline is that we couldn't validate the results that we got from the data. Um, it was like a very complex finance process, and so the only thing we could validate is that okay, the data is giving us what we've told it to give us in the pipeline, and it would have to be finance that comes and basically says the data is okay or it isn't. So fine. So in the last, since the pipeline has been like in production, we only got 2 files from finance in the last year, and those went off fine. Everything was fine. Finance said it was fine. So we carried on and building other pipelines. And then we recently got a file about a month ago from finance. And so they had told us that they're going to give us like now the file on a periodic basis. That means every 4 weeks we would get a file from finance. And so we were like, okay, cool. We get the file, it goes off without a hitch. Everyone continues with their work. And then about 2 weeks after that file was loaded, we get a notification from our project manager that hey, finance says that this data is off by 11 times. So basically, the data is blown up 11 times. And with finance, even £100 is a lot for it to be off by. So, like, usually in our team, if we have an issue with the production pipeline, we will get into a huddle to just try and brainstorm, figure out what the root cause might be. And so we'll spend a lot of time in huddles. We will also make sure to communicate with the project manager so that they can manage expectations on finance's side. on what we're doing and how long or how far we are with the fix. Cool. So we got into the huddle. We started looking at the data pipeline. We didn't even know where to start looking. And everyone was now looking at me because I was the one who was there when it was built. But I wasn't really, I was just there when we deployed to production. So fine, I had to drive in the huddles. Cool. So we start looking at the final table now that finance looks at, and to look at if these if to see if there's anything wrong with their data. So we look at the load timestamps. No, the load timestamps still look great. They are the same as they were from that original load. So we continue, and then I decide, okay, let me do a data flow diagram to just see what is going on here, because this particular pipeline had about like 24 transform views, and so we use Airflow for our pipelines. The Airflow DAG the one DAG had about 40 tasks, which were branching and combining and doing a whole bunch of weird stuff. And that wasn't the only DAG, it was 3 DAGs, and they were like all kind of interdependent. So I basically, yes, Sheena?
I think there's a lot of more junior people in the space. What's a DAG?
Oh, directed acyclic graph. So this is in Airflow. So it basically allows you to orchestrate your pipeline and say, so I have a whole bunch of tasks. So for instance, let's say I have a task that will read in the data. And then once that task is completed, I have a task that will transform the data. And then I have maybe that's an intermediate transform. And then I have now a final task that will create the presentation layer view of this data. So it basically, you can branch, you can come back, you can do a whole bunch of different things with Airflow. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the tech stack we use for our pipeline. So it's, everything is written in SQL, all the transforms are in SQL. We use Airflow to orchestrate. And what else do we use? Oh, and then obviously Python to write the Airflow DAGs, and then S3 which we use as our staging area. So if you use Snowflake, which is a data warehouse similar to Redshift, but much better, you'll find that you use like S3 stages where you will then load the data into Snowflake. So that's basically our tech stack, and that's where the Airflow comes in. Cool. So after we looked at the table and I did the data flow diagram, I decided, let me actually just start at the beginning, because now I can see how the data flows throughout the pipeline. I know which transform views feeds into which table. So let me just follow the data. And then as I was doing that, I saw, hey, man, I can see that. So I was basically comparing the raw data to our source data. So like the actual file extract that we got from finance to the raw data. Then like, luckily for me, that was like the best place to start, because right from there, I could see that, oh, okay, the data in the raw data table has 11 times more rows than the source file. So that was great. So I figured, okay, so after I saw that, I then remembered, oh, okay, we had actually made a change to this pipeline, but it had been months ago, that all of us in the team had actually forgotten, because no one was using the pipeline. We just made the change, tested it in production, and it worked. But finance hadn't verified anything, and then so we continued with life. But the change actually was that we changed the trigger of the pipeline from event-based. So before, it was triggered every time a file landed in the S3 bucket, and we changed it to a daily schedule. What we didn't realize is that the pipeline was not idempotent. So that basically means that if you run the pipeline with the same data, it should give you the same result. Whereas ours it was running every day and loading the same data over and over and over for 11 days straight. So after we realized that, we were like, okay, it's super easy now to make that fix. We can make sure that the pipeline is idempotent. And yeah, so we made that change, sent an email to finance asking them, can you please check if everything is okay? And this is now like a Friday around 12 o'clock. And we had been working on this problem since Thursday morning. And so finance comes back to us around 3 p.m. on Friday saying, no, actually, there's still an issue. And we had all like just been like, when you breathe a sigh of relief because you think that you're done with this thing that has been giving you a headache. And then we find out at 3 p.m. on a Friday that, oh no, it still isn't working correctly. And then we sat with our engineering manager and he was like, no, you guys have been working like super hard on this. Even yesterday, we finished around 7 p.m. Trying to debug. Let us regroup on Monday. No one touch it over the weekend. And so yeah, over the weekend I had to fight with all my might not to look at the code because I was also having those code nightmares because it just felt like a thing that was never ending. And having been in a huddle for like 2 days straight, I was just like, I'm so sick and tired of my teammates. I need a break from them.
You seem quite introverted. So I can
I
imagine.
am super introverted, and the whole time I had to be driving and basically explaining to them so that they could also pick up like the things that I'm picking up from like going through the data flows and all of that. So it was like a very exhausting 2 days. So I over the weekend I think I just slept most of the time, and then Monday we got back to work, and so finance tells us, oh, so we can see now that in this data that you guys have loaded, we can't see certain views of the data. So like the different period views. And so when they told us that, I think it made it also much clearer for me because it was like, okay, I know what the issue is. The issue is that there is a missing and in the select somewhere, and there are 50 that I need to look at. So I just sat down because on that day I was like, guys, no huddles, please. I'll keep you guys updated on what's going on. Now it's just, I just need to sit and read through the code. Because sometimes when you're also in that huddle situation, everyone wants to help and give suggestions. But
Yeah.
then if they aren't really coming from a place that is like, has a clue on what's going on, it's kind of a bit annoying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just sat that day reading through the code, and also the transforms aren't like small things. It's like some have over 100 to 200 lines. So I'm just reading through them, trying to figure out running each one.
I think
Yes.
I've got a fun fact.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you know that Git is actually also a directed acyclic graph?
Oh,
Git
really?
is a DAG as well. Yeah. But
I
also,
did not
sorry,
know.
your story reminded me of like, working, like the chaos of working over weekends. And well, I mean, in this case, you just had like 2 days of chaos and then it started again on Monday. And I had this experience during lockdown when everybody was like, oh, I'm like starting knitting and stuff. I was working
Flat out.
so hard, like a dog. Like it was crazy because I had a client that was we were building a system for them that helped them deliver groceries into townships, which during the COVID-19 crisis, this was a huge problem. And their website was built in WordPress and falling over, and it was really, yeah, quite a thing. So I got I had like permission to drive on the highway on the first day. I've never driven in my entire life where there's no cars. So I was, it was just a very spooky time. But so their business grew like 8,000% in about 4 weeks, and the government was relying on them to deliver groceries, and it was just, I felt like Spider-Man holding like the trains and like being ripped apart, and like, because you're not supposed to scale systems that fast at all. So at one point, the biggest, so this is my big story, and then this is my interjection here with my crazy story. So not only we this company they sold like a basket of products, right? So it'd be like some oil and some flour and some this and some that, so that you pay for a bundled product. Now, WooCommerce, when you make a bundled product, it kind of falls over because it's like, oh, I have to set 18 things to one thing, and then there's like thousands of these things, and then it kind of croaks. So we built a little thing that would tell what, if you sold one basket, it was actually 18 of these other things. Cool. Sounds cool. That's not too bad. That was already a whole palaver. I don't even know what that means, but whatever. There was a whole thing just getting that right. Then fixing all the invoices. And then what happened was there was supply chain problems. And what had happened was they'd sold to their customers 5 kilograms of flour, 1 liter of oil, and whatnot. And then the suppliers were like, okay, you've ordered 500 of these things. We can supply 250 in this format. We can supply like 250 of the 2.5 kilogram flours, and then 500, of like crazy formats of all the things. So and then of course the database that they had given us didn't have volumetric things. It was just like 2.5 kilograms flour as a string. So we had to fix all of that, and then we built them like a substitution engine that would go and find, like, if we'd sold 5 kilograms of flour to someone, that we could insert 2.5 kilograms of flour, and then we could ship like this many orders, and then the rest of the orders we'd have to like substitute in a product of similar value or from a different, like, absolute mayhem. And then you go to this to the management, and they are so busy running the company, they have like no clue how what you're doing is actually like insanely hard with the time frame, and you're trying to listen to all these different requirements. And I think like one of the hardest parts about being a dev some of the time, especially being a freelancer or maybe a consultant, is that you have to deal with educating customers on how important the technical work that you're doing is, and it's really, really hard some of the time, and it feels very lonely also some of the time. You're like, I swear this is really important, and they know, but also they don't really know, and then you have to spend a lot of time explaining that.
Like, do the magic.
Yeah. Anyway, that's me. I want to hear from Dimple.
I've got a lot of questions as well.
Question for Thandile. In that period of like 2 days when you were basically driving an entire workforce, were you even allowed to AFK for water?
Yes, we were definitely taking breaks. That's one thing we are like strict about, and we also break for lunch. But it obviously isn't as many breaks as you would take, to stretch your legs or go get some fresh air. But yeah, it was like even lunch wasn't like a full hour. It was just, okay, let's go get some food and come back. The company actually got us Uber Eats vouchers, because I think they were trying to prevent you having to go out or leave your house to get lunch. So they were just like, let's order in and then we'll regroup in 30 minutes.
Yeah, so if you start kind of looking after you a little bit. Yeah.
At least they looked after you guys. I would not have survived the pressure. It sounds like a lot of pressure. I'm not sure how you and Whitney did it, but you actually reminded me of my most recent. Okay, I wanted to tell you guys a story about my documentation, but this is far more. You guys remind me about my most recent struggle. So a client comes to us and they're like, we need our payments functionality. So I also work in fintech. Basically, I'm a mashonisa, but like not in South Africa, in like 4 different African countries. A mashonisa is a money lender, basically. So they give out loans. They're like, we need a way to perform bulk payments. So if a client is refinancing or refinancing and taking out a loan, and at the same time they want to pay off something else at the same time. So that's what we did, and like we need a way for the system to do everything in one call. I need you to know that I'm a junior dev. And somehow they were like, it's the only ticket left in the sprint. Dimple can do it. And I'm like, okay, cool, fine. I'll take it. Started with the analysis, which was fairly easy. It took me a while, but like once I got the hang of things, I was like, okay, I can do this. It's fine. Except I ran into my first hurdle. The database that they use is one of the most restrictive, terrible databases to ever exist. Not sure if I'm allowed to say it.
Okay.
It's Sybase. But honestly, this database,
database?
I'm not. Yes, I promise it's a database. If nobody's heard of it, you know why. It's so terrible. It's so restrictive. It doesn't allow you to do all these incredible things, and it's just like, okay, fine. Work with what you have. I had to go to my leads and I was like, this is my first problem. Somehow I need to convert this list into I need to split this list up and insert it into this database in each individual columns. But your problem is your database doesn't do that. It doesn't even have a data type for this. It doesn't allow this. It's just the worst. So my boss is like, you know what? How about you just create a temporary table and then insert your data into that temporary table and then somehow find a way to run each payment that was made in this, like say if it's one call and there are 4 different payments, run each payment individually through a stored procedure. And I'm like, okay, I didn't think of that. You're so smart. I appreciate you. Obviously, you got to kiss ass a bit, but yeah, he was great. So I was like, okay, fine, I can do this. I finish up the analysis. My documentation is approved. They're like, okay, implementation time. Second problem. I'm not allowed to create tables in this database. And I'm just like, so what do I do? The platform manager's like, just do it. It doesn't matter. Just do it. I'm like, okay, I can do this. Please remember, I am a junior dev. I panic very easily. So best believe, as I wrote that SQL script, I had to triple check it. I triple checked it. And then I still went on to check it some more because I wasn't sure that it was actually going to work because I'm not allowed to create tables in this database. But I did it anyway and it worked out. And I was like, okay, cool. I can do this. And then they're like, tackle the SQL. If you know me, you know how much I hate SQL. I know it's English, but like it's not English. I say, please select this and it goes and does something different or it throws you an error. And I don't get that. It killed me just a little bit. So I was like, okay, fine. This proc has to have a cursor. It has to have all these amazing things. It has to have, I was just like, I've never done this level of SQL before in my life. We run to our database expert. He's just like, yeah, you're in trouble. But like, there is a way. And I was just like, this is why we support this old man. He is the best. Because if you know anything about this database, the people that are experts in it are ancient. There is no young expert in it.
Legacy.
The documentation even sucks. Yes. Somehow I got this proc to work with like a lot of help and I was just like shocked. So now it's like time to move on to the Java. And then I'm like, I don't have much faith in myself right now. So I'm not sure how this is going to play out. My lead's like, I believe in you. You can do it. You're great. And I'm just like, oh, you guys have so much faith in me. You should really stop. But you can't say that out loud. So you take it in stride. Somehow, someway, we managed to make everything work. The product was great. It ended up being really phenomenal at the end. We said how we had to set a new standard. We had to set a brand new documentation standard as well. And I found a bug after I created it because I realized it only prints out two values, an ID and an amount. So if you are paying all the same amount to different people, you're never going to know which payment is which. And I already know my QA people, they're going to be like, this is a bug, this is a problem, this is an issue. And then when I brought it up, they were like, you read our mind. You definitely read our mind. Fix it. So they're like, okay, fine. If I give you a reference, will it help? And I was just like, as long as I don't have to handle how each reference has to be unique, I can make it work for you guys. So we did all the modifications. My merge request is about to be approved, hopefully tomorrow, because it is the end of sprint and I can't afford for it to roll over. And I'm not sure how I survived. I'm going to say it was a month because it was 2 sprints and each sprint was 2 weeks. I'm not sure how I survived that month. Best believe I had the worst coding nightmares. I woke up at, I think, 2 a.m. every day for 2 weeks straight so I could start working because I feel like I wasn't doing enough. And somehow, thankfully, my team is incredibly supportive and incredibly knowledgeable. They encouraged me every step of the way and we did it. So hopefully when it eventually gets to production, I won't share a single complaint from country because I can't afford to deal with that again.
Gosh,
So,
that sounds very stressful.
It was so stressful. And I'm so easily panicked.
It's always quite nice to hear how supportive the BBD team is when with their juniors. They're like, cool, here's a hard thing, stretch yourself. But there's always, like, there are people around that you can ask. And that's a really good way to grow. Even if it's, even if it hurts sometimes. Gosh. So I've got a whole lot of questions for Thandile, and I see a few more in the comments. So I want to just circle back and then if anybody wants to ask more questions, please add some in the chat. I think we've got some good raw material here. So one of my questions is about huddles, because that's a tricky thing. So Thandile, you said initially you were in a lot of huddles, and then you eventually pulled back from them because you're like, the stuff is distracting and you people aren't actually adding value. So how is there such a thing as so there is such a thing as a good huddle? Like, getting people to work together is really great, and having people that you can ask for help, as Dimple has mentioned, is really fantastic. Many brains on the same problem is it's a good thing a lot of the time, but it can also be detrimental to progress. So are there ways to make nice huddles when you're solving technical problems? Is there a recipe for success, or are you just we feel it out and then if it doesn't work we stop?
I definitely say feel it out. So our approach is always that when we get a production issue, we start off in a huddle. And then if we see that it isn't being very productive, then we break off and try work on the issue separately, but each tackling different aspects of it. But I'd say it is good when you are solving an issue where you kind of know what the main issue is, because there you can use that huddle to kind of delegate tasks and solve the problem faster. But I wouldn't really advise for sitting in huddles all day, because that also means that the whole team of 5 is just sitting there and watching one person doing work, when it could be maybe 2 people who have the most knowledge on that subject area could sit and do that work.
Okay, so it's do you know about mob programming?
Yeah.
So if you get, I'm sure there are people here that don't. So mob programming is pair programming, only with freaking everyone on the same problem. So it's one screen and everybody's working on the thing. And a lot of people swear by it, but I haven't actually tried it myself. for me as well, it sounds like it might be a distracting thing. It might be like an introversion extroversion thing where it's just like, all these people. Yeah.
I
So
think
as a
it's good
question,
if you're comfortable with your team.
okay.
With us now, it just turns into like a huge chat fest, um, and we get like the least amount of work done. Because I always know whenever there's a huddle going on in our Slack channel and there are like 4 people in there, I'm like, let me not go there because I know they're just chatting probably. So
Okay.
yeah, they are. What do you call it? Double-edged sword. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And then, like, the other thing is if you have a bunch of people talking in real time, then often some voices are louder than others, and some people are more able to interrupt, and some aren't. And so it's very, like, it's tricky just to get an even. It's tricky to use everybody's brain in a good way. Like some people just get left out because their personality is a little bit different. So I don't know. Do you have any strategies for coordinating that sort of thing? So like, how do you make sure that all the voices get heard? I think it's a hard thing.
Yes, I definitely do think it is a hard thing because we do have a team member who is a bit quiet. So
Is it you?
in situations like that, I do find that if there is like a task that is relevant to the issue that we're solving that he has a skill set in, try to give that to him so that he can come back and feed back to the rest of the team what he's found. So that will kind of like give that person like input into the whole conversation. But yes, if you go around and ask everyone what do you think might be the issue and then they don't know, there's nothing more really that you can do in that situation.
Okay, so it takes just like some explicit coordination. It's like, okay, you, yeah, okay, that's awesome. That's fantastic. Then, yeah, Dimple.
I just have another question for Thandile. It sounds like how you're explaining it, you became the expert because you were the longest person on the team.
Unfortunately, yes.
First of all, I'm sorry. I know what that pressure's like. But like, how did you deal with it?
Um, well, the issue needed to be solved, and also like the team structure at the time was also quite unique because we were a data engineering team and I was basically the only data engineer and we had a data scientist and a DevOps and 2 DevOps engineers. So it was not only because I was the longest in the team, but also because I was the only data engineer in the team at the time. So I would have the knowledge and the skills to actually look at the data architecture and look at all the code and figure out what's going on. Yeah, so I didn't really think anything of it because the team was also really helpful trying to like read through the code even if they don't understand. Um, yeah. And then after that, I just took the time to actually let me sit and look at this pipeline in a state where I'm not under duress and actually become um, the and become the person who actually knows how it works inside out. So yeah.
And
Um,
then just another question for Maya. In your story, you said you were under a lot of anxiety and a lot of pressure. But now that you have evolved in your career and you're basically a whole rock star, how do you ensure that the new devs that are under you now, I guess, don't have to experience that kind of anxiety that you experienced that day or in that period? How do you help them?
Multiple things. Like, I mean, I try and spot sort of future roadblock kind of things and preempt early. And we've got some processes in place such that we've got fallback processes for testing, for more testing and for stabilization. So there won't be a dev that is now faced with production that went out yesterday that's broken now. Our process doesn't work like that. So there's process in place. But I think probably one of the most important things is that continuously I have this idea that people must learn things and it's cool to make mistakes. And if anyone makes a mistake, the team has their back. It's like I also make mistakes. I sometimes at one point out, like, I don't know, sent out a version with the wrong version number, or I did a thing. So the ethic of the team is that the others have your back. And if there's a fault, if you're learning from the fault and we can help you all together solve it. So it's support from the team, solid processes that make sure that we still have production incidents every now and then, but the basic process is built such that we catch the things early if we can. So process and approach and support in the team.
That's great.
That is pretty great.
Yeah. I've got a question again for Thandile, just about catching problems in data pipelines. So something I really like is assertions, just like throw them in the code and have some sanity checking in there. And if an error is out because an assertion failed, that's great because the error is noisy as hell and it's like, I'm the problem right here and fix it. And that's a defensive programming thing. So it's like, it's kind of like defensive driving. When you're driving, you keep a safe following distance and you check your mirrors every now and again because you might screw up. You might like sneeze, who knows? A fly might land on you. Maybe there'll be a spider, who knows? Maybe the person in the car in front of you has a wobble. So there's like, the reason you leave space is because humans are humans and humans make human error. And there's also, so that's defensive driving. Defensive coding is like assuming that humans will make human error and like building in some guardrails along the way. So something I've been thinking about is like, how should data scientists do this? Like the standard like developers typically will, write unit tests and things like that, but data scientists tend to not do that. And even when it comes to data pipelines, often like there's not a lot of like unit test type things. But simple things like saying, all right, we've got this data frame, or I don't know, even an array or whatever, this query set, and we expect it to have this many rows at this point, and we expect that one to have this many rows afterwards. So you can like do things like put in assertions about the dimensions of your data. So like this column should always be positive at this point in the data process. Like, do you make use of anything like that? Like just putting in assertions?
Yes, we do. So we do have unit tests, but those are to test like our reusable artifacts, like our stored procedures. And then we have smoke tests, which are end-to-end tests that basically test the entire transform across the pipeline. And as you get to like a table, a stage where there's a table in the pipeline, you would basically do a check, is this data in this table how I expect it to be? But those are like tests that we run when we're merging into or deploying into production, not something that run when the data is flowing through the pipeline. With our new pipelines, we are actually adding those kinds of checks with DBT, which actually is quite cool. So we're moving away from our old system and using now DBT. And this has some very good testing capabilities where after each transform view, you can actually just add a test, make sure that the reference, maybe you are doing a join to a table, make sure that this value exists in this table that you're joining to, make sure these values fall within a certain range and all of that. And with the addition of a data science person in the team, we actually are looking to do like more fancier checks that, I don't know, I'm not a data scientist, so he'll use his modeling to just figure out how things are going in the pipeline.
For some reason, that kind of thing.
Yeah, okay, stuff like that.
That's awesome. Oh, that's super cool. And then, like, I think you were talking about how you were using Airflow, and like I love Airflow. It's fantastic. I like it a lot. But it does have that fault in that you can't necessarily, like, it doesn't make the data flow or the data transformations obvious at all. Like, it's not its default behavior. It's about tasks. It's not necessarily about data, but you can use it for data. And so it almost seems to me that, like, if you wanted to stick with Airflow, then you want to almost like have your own convention around what the tasks are, so that you can like have a way of keeping track of the data flow. So you made data flow diagrams, I think, by hand. Yeah, so I'm just wondering if there's any tricks that you have up your sleeve around like making the data flow a little bit more obvious from a standard DAG. Like maybe there's just like a fancy naming convention that you can follow.
So yes, we do follow like naming conventions in terms of if this task is inserting data into this table, name it. So we use Data Vault as our modeling framework. So that has like a raw data vault, business data vault, and a presentation layer. So you would always prefix it with the which schema the table is in, and then the name of the table. And then once you click in there and you go to the XCOMs or the logs, it's going to show you which transform view it was pulling from and inserting into which table. But the issue now is you don't want to just click on one task and see what's going on in there. You want to see the bigger picture, which is what Airflow can't really give you.
Yeah. I was thinking like maybe there's a way to have something that can almost ingest your DAG files and all of that information, and then spit out a graph and like, okay, cool, this DAG makes this, and just like stick up, like throw out a picture. But I guess like
so we have that in our pipeline, like using Python, where it will spit out the data flow diagram. But with this pipeline, it's 3 DAGs, so it would be like 3 separate data flow diagrams. But we want to see how they actually link up and then how it goes back to the original one. Yeah. So
it still gets quite messy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But naming conventions save lives, you guys. That's takeaway, or a takeaway. Yeah. And then like you use DBT. Do you use it in conjunction with Airflow? Because like Airflow is great at all sorts of things, and DBT is great at. Okay, sweet. So you have like DBT based tasks on your DAG.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
that's cool. Okay, rock on. Yeah, I think those are all of my questions. There were a bunch of questions from the audience. So let me see. There is, this one's tricky. All right, so talking about quietness, is it something that one needs to overcome in order to presume leadership roles in tech? It seems like a thing that seemed as a con. Okay, so quietness seems like a con. Thank you for the question, Rafil. That is actually a very tricky thing, because I think like if you if you're like unable to get your opinion across because everybody's being crazy noisy in a meeting, then, or like you're unable to interrupt, then things can get quite like if you can't get your opinion across, then how can you lead effectively? I think that's, yeah, it's a hard situation to be in. But that said, like Thandile, you seem pretty introverted. I might be making some assumptions about you, but you seem like quite a quiet person. But at the same time, you seem to be just from our conversation now, it seems like you take on a leadership role, and you also like give other people voices. So I think this might be a very good question for you to answer.
So I think from myself personally, being a quiet person, I found it very like important that if I have that opportunity, give other quiet people a voice. But how I've kind of maneuvered around it in my career is that I've always tried to work or like build relationships on a one-to-one basis. So if I join a team, I'm literally going to have catch ups with everyone on the team just to try to build a relationship with them and get comfortable with them as a person. And so if I have that one-to-one relationship with everyone as a team, it's also going to be more comfortable for me to speak up when I have ideas or I want to say something in a meeting and all of that. And then obviously, as you get more senior in your role, definitely don't forget about the quiet people. Try to give them a voice, and in a meeting, ask if they have anything they'd like to add. Yeah.
That's great. Dimple?
Building on this question that you were answering, Thandile, is knowing when to speak also a leadership quality? Like, if you are quiet as by nature, but you know when to, you actually know when to contribute and you know when to speak, does it work in your favor? Is it beneficial? And does it help you be a leader in the sense?
I definitely think so, because there are people who talk and they talk a lot, but they don't necessarily add value whenever they speak. And I was watching a podcast yesterday, and this person was talking about, working in a team environment. You, as a team member, you each kind of get contribution scores. So it's when Thandile speaks, do people respect what she's going to say? Do they listen? Versus, oh, Thandile just speaks all the time and adds value only 50% of the time, versus she adds value 90% of the time when she speaks. So it's like, I don't think it's necessary in the team to be like the blabbermouth and be like the joker or whatever, but it's about when you speak, can you actually contribute something that people are going to value?
That's good. I think like another aspect of leadership, or like something I like to think about. Actually, there's a few things. So the one is like, sometimes even if you know the answer as a leader, like you should hang back a little bit and let other people come up with it, because like otherwise they don't get to grow. And otherwise I'll be always like looking to you for the answers, and being a leader isn't necessarily being the person who knows it all and makes all the decisions. Yeah, Maya?
Yeah, sometimes hanging back and let someone else answer the question, because I think I know the answer, but then when they do answer the question, I realize, oh no, I didn't know the answer at all. So it's a good idea to sometimes hang back.
Yeah, that's great. So just because you're the leader doesn't mean that you should, like, you should still respect the opinions of the people who are with you, because they probably do know things that you don't, because they're closer to problems than you are. I think the other thing about like leadership is just like setting a good example, and that's often like if you just show up in the right way, then that can be pretty great. So like treating code review in a specific way, treating your peers in a specific way. If somebody gets stuck, then you're the person who's like, hey, maybe I can help with that, or like if you really believe that you can. So I think just stepping up in different ways doesn't necessarily mean being noisy. It just means stepping into leadership things. Yeah, that was a nice question, because like I can be quiet, and it's a challenge. All right, there's something here that I just don't understand, so I'm going to bring it up. Hey Thandile, I'm marking the register. Ha ha ha, demonite. Could you please explain?
Oh yeah, Mulato's my colleague.
Okay.
Hey Mulato.
All right. Cool. We have a few more questions. So this one, I think it's addressed to Maya, but I think that it's probably something that everybody can comment on. So tech changes all the freaking time, all the time. It's impossible to keep up with it unless you're like quite narrowly focused, I find. So yeah, how do you all deal with that? Who wants to go first? It's a hard thing.
I vote Maya, but also, guys, I'm so sorry to be rude. I have to go and solve a production problem. So it's was lovely spending time with you, and good luck.
That's always appropriate.
And catch you soon. Thanks so much, guys.
Smash
Bye.
it. Bye. Gosh. Okay. So it was your final wish that Maya answers the question.
Okay. So I'm kind of curious about a lot of stuff, so I read a lot of stuff. I have to force myself to just scan headlines sometimes because I always want to go deep into a thing. So I mean, I have various different sources, so I'm kind of like keeping my finger on the pulse, even though I'm not diving in deep. So I've got a kind of a broad view. But the other thing that I would say is what I do quite actively every, say, 2 years, maybe 3 years, is I assess the tech that I'm in, and I look at the industry, and I make a call. Am I still happy in the tech that I'm in? Do I still want to do, I don't know, mobile dev? Do I still want to code in Kotlin? Yes, I do. Or so a few years back, I did a whole lot of courses on AI things in case, or machine learning things in case that's a kind of an area that I should be skilling up and changing direction. And then I've got like certain like things I know now, the kinds of things that I like doing and the things that I don't like doing. And even if it's a tech industry that I kind of measure about, like by now I know the kinds of things I like doing or don't like doing. So I think that kind of overview of the whole industry and trying to make a call. So that's how I went into mobile. I was doing other embedded code, and at one point I went into mobile, and it was in one of those kind of bigger retrospective things that made me do that. So I would say that, and I would say that like I'm doing courses all the time. I'm listening to podcasts all the time, and I'm actually actively learning new things, both for my job, but also adjacent and a little bit wider. I mean, sometimes I'll just do randomly, just like open up the podcast thing and just randomly click on a thing, even if it's something, or look at people's recommendations. So I kind of make my path go learning in a bit and a bit wider.
Okay.
Does that help?
So, I think so. It just sounds like you're a very curious person, and that's useful on its own and is worth nurturing. Do you think that your curiosity is something that you built in yourself, or do you think it's something that you were born with? It would be great if we could build curiosity. I think, yeah, you go.
So I think, I mean, of course, there's obviously a born thing to it, obviously. But I also think there's a positive feedback loop to it. It's like if you just put yourself out there and learn new things and just try being curious, and then allow yourself to be amazed by the things you find, then it just becomes self-fulfilling, right? And then I definitely think you can practice it. And it's like an attitude thing as well, right? It's like, I know I won't know everything or have read everything. So it used to make me sad, but now it makes me happy because it means every single time I go to find a thing, there's always going to be something cool and new to learn. So yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
an approach as well.
That's cool. And Thandile, how about you?
I'd also say it's very similar to Maya. So like reading and listening to podcasts. And also I think being in consulting also kind of helps because you go to a different client, you have to use a different tech stack. So it kind of forces you to learn something new. And so as you're learning that new thing, you might then come across something new, and then you start digging into that. So yeah, I think just keeping an open mind. But most of my upskilling is in the data space, so I don't try to stretch myself too thin across app development and all of that, because I also haven't done too much of that in my career. I try to make sure that I become a data expert. So be it reading up on data ops, data engineering, data architecture. So I try to kind of focus my upskilling on those three areas.
Hey, rock on. So having a focused approach, I think it does make a lot of sense. Dipwa, do you have any strategies that you use?
I was gonna say I'm still new in the tech space, but I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I mostly draw inspiration and learn about all the things that are relevant from the people around me. I mean, BBD has Tech Away Thursdays on a Thursday where people will talk about new tech and stuff. So it's very beneficial, very informational. Yeah, it's incredible. And also what the people around me are doing, what work they're working on, what their clients are doing, or what the new thing they're trying to implement or see is. You draw quite a lot of inspiration from that, and it makes you want to find out more about, oh, okay, cool. I heard someone talk about this technology. Now I definitely want to go find out what it does or what it is and how it maybe can help me. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but more often than not, I always learn something new. So just keeping up with people around me.
I think that's great. I think that's super cool. I think having a culture of like learning and teaching each other is freaking powerful. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, cool. Let's find another question. All right. So there's one that's specifically for you, Thandile. So what was your career path to get into data science, and can you make any recommendations? So I know you did the masters in philosophy. Or
Yeah, MPhil. You make me sound like I'm a philosopher here. um, so my path to data science, I think, started and ended with that MPhil that I did, because I did it. I think I was 1 year into working, and so data science, it was what was it, the career of the year or something like that. So I was like, okay, let me try get into this. I'm already in data; it shouldn't be too hard. And so I applied for the course at UCT. I got in. I did it. And I found that I didn't like it. I don't like stats. So I just suffered through it for that year. And then I never touched any data science tool ever again after that.
fair enough.
But but I can advise on like if you would want to get into data engineering, because even if you are a data scientist, having data engineering capabilities is also quite important. I would definitely say for that, get into Python, be very comfortable with Python. SQL must be like your second language. Um, Also getting into like some orchestration tools, so that you can, if you're in a team where there are no data engineers, actually build your data pipeline to get them into your database or data warehouse so you can start building your models.
That's great. Um, so I was actually something landed in my inbox today, and I'm just posting a link to a video that I watched today that had some really good advice about like a brilliant book on data science that you can read and how you can quickly get some experience in it as well. So check that out. Um, that's cool. All right. So what's next? So there's another question here, and this one's actually like a little bit of a rabbit hole. Like we can talk about this for literal hours. So I'm just going to bring it up. I don't think we need to have a big discussion about it now because it's like a big one. But let's just get a show of hands. How many of the people on this call have had this feeling where you're like, shit, am I in the right place? Am I in the right job? Yeah, so this is called imposter syndrome, and it's totally normal. Like, it's totally normal. There aren't very many techies that I've spoken to who haven't felt this at some point or another. And I think partially it's because it's like, it's such a tricky field and it keeps changing. And like, then you have like a weird bug because of the semicolon. You're like, it's the first thing to realize is that it's a completely normal thing. And then the second thing to realize is that because it's completely normal, there are lots of people who have nice strategies for dealing with it, and it's okay to talk about it. And we actually have another live stream that we did a while back that's on the channel, and you can go watch it. And it's all about imposter syndrome. And we're probably going to do a follow up because everybody wanted a follow up. We just haven't yet. So yeah, go and watch that other video if you just go to the streams and see it. Yeah. And then the other question, this one is for Dimple. So let me bring it up. How has the journey at BBD been? I would love to apply for an internship program upon finishing my web development learnership.
Wow, this is an interesting question. So I was an intern for about 1.5 years. in my first year, I almost quit. I won't lie. Imposter syndrome had me bad, and I genuinely felt like I did not know what I was doing. But BBD is such a supportive environment, and everybody wants to see you win. And I didn't believe it at first, but they genuinely want to see you win because, I mean, it makes everybody look good when you are winning. So, and the client is happy, and business is flowing. So, if you're winning, everyone's winning. It took me a very long time to find, I guess, my groove. It took me a very long time to actually start opening up to my teammates. But once I let go of my own prejudices of what I thought a woman in tech should be, or how I should hold myself and the standard that I should hold myself to, it's so much fun. I mean, you meet incredible people, you have incredible experiences, and the work that you do is, well, I don't know about other people, but for me, I love it. I love my job. So it's been an incredible journey. I won't even lie. I have felt motivated and supported every step of the way. And I feel like I'm thriving now, even when the bouts of like unsureness, I'm still thriving. So it's a great place to be, as long as you can handle the pressure. And there is going to be quite a bit of pressure, but like, it's an incredible place to be, honestly. And I am so thankful for my journey.
That's
just going to keep growing from here.
Yeah, so Dimple was one of my students at Umuzi, and like Umuzi's had a partnership with BBD for a while, and they put us through our paces. They hold us to a very high standard, and they make us better at training people. But I also know that they so to get in, like, you need to be very good, which is great, and once you're in, they really, really look after you. They put a lot of effort into helping you learn and grow. It's a big deal. So when I'm hiring, if I see BBD on someone's CV, I'm like, ooh, it's like a little Easter egg for me. Yeah, like, go for it. I think it's super cool. I'm just going to post a link to the imposter syndrome video here. Slight disclaimer. I was using Google Meet as a streaming platform because it works as one, but the problem is that it only shows the face of the person who's talking, and so I look like a crazy person. I'm not really, but I look like a crazy person because I'm like laughing to myself and nonsense like that. So yes, that is the first stream. It's awkward, but I think it's useful. So check that out. Yeah. So we've got 3 minutes left, which isn't a lot of time. Does anybody want to shamelessly plug anything that they're working on, or anything that they're, yeah, any closing remarks from any of you? Yes.
I want to say one thing about that imposter syndrome. Sometimes when it feels like you're not in the right job, when it feels like I'm not in the right job, maybe I'm in the right job, but just at the wrong place, right? So it might be that either the team energy or the actual job. So then it's not the career, it's the support around you. That's all.
No, that's a good point. Thandile, would you like to say anything? You've been doing a bunch of writing lately. Maybe you want to plug your stuff. No? Okay.
No, thank you.
Not yet. Okay, cool. Any closing remarks, Dimple?
Yes, I was about to post a link. Come to BBD Escape. It's going to be great.
Yeah, it's going to be cool. So BBD Escape is a conference that used to be internal to BBD, and I was lucky enough to be invited to one as an external person, and it was so freaking cool. And like really high quality talks. BBD is very supportive. They support their speakers a lot as well. So all of the talks are super high quality, and yeah, I think it's going to be kept. This is the first time it's open to the public, so it's going to be awesome. Oh, I'm excited. It's going to be so cool. Okay, I think that is it from all of us. Thank you, audience. It's been great interacting with you, and I hope you found this valuable. Cheers.